Welcome to AI Lab Unfiltered, the podcast where we take a deep dive into artificial intelligence. We got a great show today. We're going to talk about AI agents. We're going to talk about AI automation, some different tool sets, and we're going to talk about conspiracies.
Yes.
So I'm super excited about this. Joining us is Alex Mead. Welcome, Alex.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's a privilege to be here.
You are a thought leader in reshaping organizations, how they leverage cutting-edge technologies is what I have. Give me a little bit of background on you.
Sure. Yeah, well, I'm an engineer, so actually the guy that's writing the code, if you will. Very broad background. Went to University of Michigan and actually studied civil engineering.
Go blue.
Yeah, I know. Go blue, right? This year was a little rough compared to last year. But, I heard it was actually the worst repeat for a national defender ever. I don't know. Oh. Okay, I don't want to get distracted on that.
The conspiracy theories are already starting.
Yeah, I know, right? Decided I wanted to work with energy. Ended up going and getting a PhD from UC Berkeley in California. Learned a lot about technology there. That was kind of like an electrical engineering kind of a program. So did a lot with software, a lot with computing and that kind of thing. Ended up deciding to leave academia and join the startup world. And I've just been doing technology and business since then. So it's been a great ride. Yeah.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything in the recent news about AI that's maybe worth talking about?
Thanks for asking, Pete. That's a very good question. I'm sure everyone's saying this, but DeepSeek and this kind of new model that dropped allegedly or appearing out of nowhere, kind of specifically the R1 version, which dropped, I think, maybe 10 days ago, 12 days ago, something like that. And what's really kind of catching everyone's attention is the fact of the numbers that it was published with and where it was coming from. So one, it's open source, right? So we can all, take this and pull it off of the internet and run it ourselves if you have enough hardware. And that hardware isn't completely inaccessible for the average person. Like, 8 to 10,000, you could be running something like this. And a lot of people are. Another thing is the fact that they published how they did it, which is always interesting as well, right? Like you can publish, the chemistry formulas for things, but it doesn't mean you can actually replicate something, right? So that was a big thing. Another big thing is where it came from, right? And this is kind of where we start to get down the conspiracy theory and this, that, and the other. But it came from a Chinese company, which until now haven't been making huge, kind of announcements and advancements like this. But this appears to be the real deal. And the amount of money that they claim to have done this with is extremely low. It's something in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 million, compared to 50 to 100 million or billions.
Which is the typical model of what it takes.
Exactly.
So it's like, how did you get to that point? Well, first, let's just quick primer of give us the 3 sentence of what DeepSeek is.
Yeah. So DeepSeek is actually like a research company that was spun out of a hedge fund in China. And they have a number of models that they've been publishing. So V2 and V3 were your more traditional kind of large language models, basically like the ChatGPT 3 kind of a thing, right? And then this latest one, this kind of -R, is this idea of a reasoning model, which is really kind of the more abstracted field of AI that this kind of falls into. So that would be like your O1, your O1 Pros from like the ChatGPT world or OpenAI world. And it uses kind of fundamentally this idea of what's called chain of thought, which is just the way like we think, right? Like, okay, I give you this complicated problem, and then you break it down into a series of steps in order to solve that problem. So you kind of take one big problem, break it down into a set of steps, and then solve those steps, and then you end up with a solution.
Is chain of, because there's, for people who follow this, and I read about AI every single day, is there a difference between chain of thought, which is a very specific way, I think, to train a model versus reasoning? Because some of the other models use the term reasoning. Are those one and the same, or are those different things?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's important in AI in general to establish definitions and actually understand what people are talking about. And these things overlap, and people use those words interchangeably.
Yeah.
Okay. So typically when people say like reasoning, quote unquote, they're thinking about this idea of like these logic type problems. Like, a classic example you can do is like, how many R's are in strawberry, right? Like, okay, the obvious answer is, I believe, 3, right? But, you can trick it because of the way that it's actually doing the results or the way that the model actually runs.
Let's get nerdy. Okay.
Yeah.
We're recording a couple of these, and we know we anticipate we're going to have an audience that is kind of on a spectrum of where they're at from technology or AI.
Sure.
But I think with this one, we can have some fun and like get a little bit more technical. So
Sure.
AI doesn't look at a word the same way that we look at a word. Like they tokenize it, right? Can you talk about that and why it's so difficult for a language model to know that there's 3 R's in strawberry?
Yeah, totally. So, where to always kind of start these conversations is tough. At what level with different people? So we'll try to dive in a little deeper, right? So at the end of the day, all of these models, no matter what they're doing, is just math. It's just a bunch of matrices, which are these square groups of numbers being multiplied together. And then at the end, you end up with these numbers, and then they just map those numbers back to words. So you start off with a sentence, and then each one of those words in that sentence, and now we can actually double click again. It's not actually words, but most people use that as a stand-in. It's actually what's called a token. And there's all these different dictionaries of mapping words to tokens, okay? A token is just a number. That's all it is. So now we understand how we went from a sentence to math, okay? And then that token then, so we take a sentence, convert all of that, those words into these tokens or numbers. Now we're in math land, okay? Now that number, that row of numbers is a vector. It gets multiplied all together through all these different matrix multiplications and different types of convolutional filters and all sorts of different stuff. It's
are those also what you call weights?
So the weights are the values in those matrices. Exactly.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And what those matrices do is they kind of encode knowledge in some way. They encode these patterns, okay? And then so you do all this big math. Then at the very end, you get a vector out again. Then you convert it back from those tokens, okay? How you get those values in those matrices is the training process. And they basically take a bunch of inputs and a bunch of outputs that they know, and then they feed them through from the inputs and say, is this close to the output? And then based on how different it is, they change the weights. And they basically iteratively do that billions, trillions, tens of trillions of times. That's the training. That's why you need so much computation. And then that somehow captures all these patterns, okay? That's kind of when people say, like, we have no idea how they work. It's like that's what they're referring to. Like, at a fundamental level, it's very clear what they're doing. We could exactly replicate the math with 100% certainty because it's running on hardware. If we couldn't do that, then the hardware wouldn't work, right? So we know, exactly what they're doing mathematically. But you went from a sentence into math world. What does that mean? Right? We have no idea what that means. So to get back to your original question, the reasoning is kind of this almost emergent property at the end of like, hey, it got it. Like, how many R's are there? But how did it get that way? Well, we have no idea because you went into matrix math land, did all these computations, and then are coming back into this non-matrix world, okay? So there's all sorts of like test cases and benchmarks that people use to try to understand that. But fundamentally, it's kind of one of these probabilistic-based things. And that's where you start to get into the idea of like, well, what's your theory of knowledge and how do you think people really are? Like, are we just chemistry? Are we just this? Is there a soul? And you end up in all these kind of other questions, right? Where you start to say like, well, what is reasoning? And so I don't know if that kind of answered your question. But.
Well, first I want to say I'm glad you remembered what my question was because I forgot what the hell I even said. I got so engrossed in your description, which was brilliant. Yeah. But that brings it back to Drew was asking about what's so special about DeepSeek, and you talked about chain of thought because it's kicking the ass of some of these other models on the benchmarks, right? So in conspiracy theory, right, is that OpenAI and I think they came out and said, or Microsoft came out and said, hey, we have evidence that they copied some of our code and they just tweaked it and made it a little bit better.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
So what is so special about it? Why are people raving about it? Why did NVIDIA's stock dropped 17% on the announcement. Like, can you talk about that?
Well, there's a lot you just said there.
Yeah.
I have thoughts on all of them. So the first one right off the bat is a very interesting thing. Why did NVIDIA's stock drop? People have been talking about that. I don't know. I'm not a stock analyst, but I did work in crypto for a few years. So I know a little bit about finance.
We'll bring you back for another crypto episode.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I don't work there for a reason. But there's a thing called Jevons paradox, which was first observed in England in like the 1800s. And it was this observation that as people got more efficient with the use of coal, you would think, oh, coal use is going to go down. But it actually like went up, right? So why is that? Because people found new uses for coal that were at a lower price point. And so there's, I think, a little bit of something going on there with NVIDIA is like the market is responding saying, oh, we don't need as much GPU compute. But they don't understand Jevons paradox, which is basically saying like, no, it's actually going to just enable so much more, right? Which, if you couldn't afford a certain thing with AI before, now you can. So I think that that's a little misguided. Maybe it had to do with the fact that Trump announced a tariff on Taiwanese chips. Probably had something to do with it. Maybe there's some insider trading going on. Maybe it was hedge funds doing weird stuff like, possibly releasing a model. And then you had shorts on stocks and you knew it was going to do this. I don't know. You know what I mean? There's this, who can predict why the stock did something? But
and that could be, those assumptions that, well, why do we need all this compute could be based on misinformation, right? Because there's people that dispute, kind of going back to your original point, there's no way in hell these guys only spent $6 million to build this model.
Highly unlikely is probably the
when the chips alone cost more than that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you guys are business guys. We all know you can reframe the exact same financial book from very different perspectives.
Yep.
And you do that with like tax accounting versus investment, right? I mean, this is well known. So what does 5 million mean? What does that even mean?
Right.
Was that the salaries of the people? Maybe that was only the salaries. Maybe that was the rent. I don't know. Did they like very clear what they said? So
right.
Who knows? I think they're, we could go anything from like this is a total Chinese psyop to it's just a PR stunt, right? So, but it seems that, all said and done out the door, 5 to 6 million seems a little low. Seems a little low for what they've managed to pull together.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not just your opinion. I mean, some of the leaders of these larger Perplexities CEO came out and talked about it. So this is more than just one person's. If it is a conspiracy theory, you're not the only one who's subscribing to it.
Yeah, I don't know. Conspiracy theory is very interesting. I don't know. I have this term now that I use. I say adult conversations, and like we really struggle with them in America. And there's a couple of reasons why. One, because a lot of people just can't have adult conversations. Another thing is it's easy to dismantle someone proposing something very serious on like a lower grounds. Like you can just kind of debate them away, even though it's like a very reasonable position. A lot of it also is like, you're throwing your own smoke because you want to talk your book. You want to make different decisions, right? So I think there's a lot of people who appear to be just taking all this stuff on face value who like are way too smart for that. So, who knows? This is the real world. This is an adult world. Buyer beware.
Yeah. So this DeepSeek model, and we don't have to spend our whole time talking about this, but it's relevant to right now, and it's a great model. People are getting great results using it. There is some fear that if you're going direct to DeepSeek, that your data is being collected and shipped back to China. I've read a post on Reddit about it. I didn't dive in and look for facts, and so I can't verify that that's actually the case. But even if it is, there are other people who are now building off of that model that you could use it in a safe way. Do you would you mind speaking to that, or just totally. so kind of assuage the fears of people who want to play around with it, but they hear these rumors? Like, what's a safe way that people can use R1 right now? DeepSeek?
Yeah, totally. So I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding of the terms of service definitely open the door to all your data's in China. And that has to do with just the way Chinese companies run. They have to have all their data in China, and they're also required to have a formal relationship with the government. This is well known.
Yeah.
I love China. I've been to China 3 times. I think it's a great place, but they've got some issues that they're working through over there. And so would you be wise to trust them with any type of sensitive information? Absolutely not. So I would not use their servers and that kind of thing. I mean, I joked as soon as I heard about this, I literally in my head go, oh, this is TikTok 2.0.
Yeah.
Like they're just going to take all the data and run with it. But that being said, they released the code, the source code. So you can go look through every line by line. You can look at the weights and you can run it on your own hardware. And they're for sure not doing that then. They're not taking your data. The way you could even verify that is literally unplug the Ethernet on your computer,
right,
and then play with it, right?
Yeah.
You know, and if you're running it in an environment where you are controlling the actual model itself, like Olama would be an example of a software stack that allows you to run them locally, you know, you do something through that, you're good to go. Also, you know, at the same time, it's like if you run it through like Microsoft is a real company with very serious brand value, right? Like,
sure.
You think they're going to have some backdoor deal with the China? No, right? So like, if you felt comfortable running things on your kind of corporate stack in Microsoft, you can definitely run anything there. Yeah, it's kind of a transferring of that risk to them for sure.
You said earlier that, you know, if you had $8,000 to $10,000 worth of hardware, you could run it locally. Again, I'm on Reddit is where I get a lot of my AI news.
Sure.
And I haven't downloaded it myself or tried it, but they said that they were able to make a condensed version of it that they said you could even run on your phone. Is that like way out there, like not even possible, or could there be any legitimacy to that?
No, it could totally be legit. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that you can do models, like smaller ones. One, they often release smaller versions of like the same. So often when you'll read models being released, they'll say the family of models. Many people maybe notice that. That usually means they have like their big flagship one, which is totally the full deal, the whole Monty. And then they'll have smaller ones. So for example, Llama, when they released theirs, they had like their 70B, 70 billion. Yeah. And they had their 8B, their 80 billion, right? And then they also had like some pre-trained, post-trained, right? Like all these different classes of models. There's also things you can do like called quantization, where basically you just use smaller numbers in those matrices all the way along. And so you do that by basically just, this is where you get a little technical, but you just use less bytes. So instead of having, let's say, 4 bytes of memory, which are a byte is 8 zeros and ones, so that allows you to represent 256 different numbers. And then as you get more bytes, you can do bigger numbers. What if we just cut that in half, right? So you just have half the precision. That's called quantization. That's a way that you can get decreased performance, but decreased memory. And the idea is that is like non-linear relationship. So you cut by half the memory usage, but you don't cut by half the performance. That's quantization. So there's a number of, and there's others as well. There's a number of techniques that you could do. On a phone, I don't know. That's pretty low, but you're not running any 70 billion parameter model on your phone. Yeah. That's not happening. But
that might have been clickbait.
Could have been.
Well, it was on the internet, so it's got to be true.
It's got to be true. Yeah.
So talking about, I want to switch gears just a little bit. Talking about AI agents, AI automation.
Sure.
What do you see? First of all, can you define kind of the layman's terms of each one, just so we understand? Mm-hmm. And where do you see those being applied in daily life, in business, in our personal lives?
Totally. Yeah, it's again, I'm glad you asked for the definitions because that's important. And they're a little fuzzy, okay? But broadly speaking, the way I think about AI automation versus, let's say, AI agents is it has to do with the amount of kind of pre-configuration that the engineers have going into the problem. So AI automation tends to be like very prescriptive, rule-based, very like close-bounded problems where the AI is kind of the pattern matching part of that whole process, but it's very well defined. So I'll give you an example. So I actually have a client that runs heavy machinery in the oil and gas industry, and they have like just mountains of sensor data on these various pieces of equipment. And we're basically building an automated tool that is able to help them understand the kind of how these machines are running and predict maintenance and predict downtime and that kind of thing. That's like classic like AI automation, right? Mm-hmm. Super cool. The numbers, if you can get even 1 or 2% improvement because they're running at such scale, is just incredible, right? Yeah. So great example of, advanced technologies, specifically around AI being implemented in real industry. That is going nowhere but up, and that's a great thing. We're doing things a lot better. AI agents are a little more kind of loose in their predefined abilities, and the kind of key difference is the reasoning typically is done by these LLMs, okay? And it's a little bit more like an actual, like an agent or an autonomous thing going out. It has a set of tools that it can use. It has a set of like memory almost, and then it has like a decision-making process, right? So it could be something like, like a email inbox reader, let's say, right? Where it's like, okay, read this email. How, kind of use your reasoning abilities to see what is this thing actually doing. And it's like, oh, it's requesting a meeting. Okay, I can use my calendar tool to put something on the internet, right? Or on my calendar, right? That would be like a little bit more of a free-floating kind of an example. Mm-hmm. But the idea is, the key difference there is you don't actually know with certitude what it's going to do, right? It has a little bit of predictability or probability-based reasoning around what it would do. Because maybe the machine also has a ping my user's phone, right? And it says, oh, I think that this is actually a more important meeting. My person who I'm running this inbox for needs to know about this like now. I'm going to send them a text message versus I'll just throw something on their calendar, right? Like that would be like an example where an AI agent, you don't necessarily know what it's going to decide, right? Mm-hmm. And then maybe the way that it's different is it uses feedback, right? So maybe the person says, oh, this is not that important. Don't bother me about this next time, and then the next time it gets an email from that particular sender, it just puts something on the calendar.
You change the model a little bit. You change that reasoning.
Mm-hmm. The memory piece gets updated then with your preferences, and it'll hopefully act different next time.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of these things are tough to define, and they get used different ways. So like another example is actually going back to the R1 is, it's kind of, they're using this like mixture of experts kind of thing where that would be maybe an agent deciding which part of the model to run. You could define that as an agent, right? So that's like an agent within a language model. Mm-hmm. So these terms start to get a little loosey-goosey, if you will. But and
I think it's because we're at such the advent of all of this that it's so new that people are trying to define it and trying to figure out what that means. So everybody's using it a little bit differently.
Totally.
The analogy that I've always liked, at least at this point, of describing AI agents versus AI automation is you walk up to a conveyor system and say, build me this widget, and it goes down, each different robot builds a piece, and it builds incrementally till it gets to the end, and here's your widget. Versus walking up to somebody and saying, build me this widget. They go build it and come back and say, here you go.
Yeah.
You really don't. They use their own reasoning, like you said, the whole reasoning model behind it to build that piece.
Yeah. It's kind of like the chain of thought.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
And you also brought up a very interesting point too, in terms of definitions and what I like to refer to, as many people say, the moving goalpost, right? Is these definitions change, right?
Yeah.
Like the example I like to give is, identifying the faces on a picture in your iPhone used to be like bleeding edge AI. Now it's like, well, everyone has that. What are you talking about? That's not AI. That's just my phone. So these things evolve and things are changing for sure.
So in the last couple of years, since AI really hit the scene and started making mainstream news, Gen AI was the big thing for like the last 2 years. But at the latter half of last year, there was so much conversation about agentic AI, AI agents, and that's where things are going. And that's not to say that that's not going to get leapfrogged by something else. I hadn't even considered what you just said about agents living within the model, because in theory that might leapfrog the whole agentic thing, possibly, right?
Yeah.
But until that happens, next week probably, when we're talking about agents, because I'm in operations, and I think about ways that we can augment our staff with AI and automate or completely take away this real tedious work that happens, like reading and responding to emails. Like, yes, there are email filters out there that will filter things from getting to you. But what if you said, my initial reaction when you said, oh, it's requesting a meeting, was automatically delete that because I don't want to meet with anybody versus go and put it on my calendar. But yours
well, that's your learning.
Yours is an even better example. But I just want to talk about like agent frameworks for a little bit. And I'll just share a little bit about one that I've been keeping track of. It's an open source model called N8N. There's another one called Make. And there's more and more every day because when you open source something, anybody can take it and put their little tweak on it and slap their marketing on it and call it their own, right?
Yep.
A la DeepSeek.
Yeah.
But
well,
maybe.
Allegedly. Perhaps.
And I think about trying to visualize this as like a bike tire. And you've got the central hub and you got these spokes that are coming out of it just to try to create a visual for people. Mm-hmm. In the middle, you've got this kind of master agent, the director of sorts. And then coming off of those spokes, you've got the different other agents. So now you have an army of agents that are being controlled by the master agent, and the master agent knows which of the other agents to call on for a specific function. So instead of just thinking in terms of something that reads my emails and creates a calendar appointment based off of that, it could suggest, you could put a human in the loop if you want to, but it could suggest a reply to that email. Mm-hmm. It could schedule the email. It could say, hey, I'm also reading all the rest of your emails, and somebody else emailed you a week ago or a year ago or whatever about this very topic. Maybe the three of you should meet together. And now it's more orchestrating and helping you build your network. We have had Elizabeth on in a previous episode here talking about marketing.
Yeah.
The idea when you think about that is, you feed something in to the front of the machine and you turn the crank a bunch of times and then something cool pops out on the other end.
Sure.
So you could have an agent that creates your marketing campaign and your whole strategy. It could create content. It could go look at your competitors and see what they're doing and bring that back to you. Have you thought about any kind of agent frameworks or anything that you think would be a practical application for that? And could we just kind of talk through that? I know I shared kind of an example already, but I'm curious as to what you think and where that might go for you.
Yeah, totally. I think you're right. I mean, just to start with your initial comment on how many frameworks there are and where that's going, who can tell with any real certitude? But that's the exciting part, right? And that's kind of, we notice this with all sorts of technologies, is initially there's many, 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 and then they kind of narrow down. Like if you look at like cars, my understanding is there were like 100 legitimate car companies in Michigan, like in 1920 or something like that. And you're like, what? It's like, really? And it's like, yeah, like making cars, like not just like not doing anything, not like VC vaporware scams, like real car companies. So I think that's a great sign of where things are to go. For me, I think the way I think about them is agents, and then what tools do they have access to? And, how you actually have this kind of master agent that delegates to other agents, or is it one master agent that uses tools, I think for me, there are low-hanging fruit that is really obvious, like customer service you mentioned. This is like an obvious use case. There's a company called Klarna that does like short-term financing. Yep. They kind of had one of the first like big generative AI type things. You could call that an agent. They basically were able to replace something like $40 million worth of customer service spend with these automated customer service tools. And then the idea is they upskill their customer service people, and they only handle the things that are complicated or confusing. I think that's the way this stuff is going in the short term. Low-hanging fruit like that, email client handlers, trip planners, those kind of things. Mm-hmm. But I think in, the 5 to 10 year horizon, I think there's going to be doing things that we have just no idea. I think they're fundamentally going to change the way that we think about it. If you were to go to 1995 and say, you guys are a little older than me, but like I remember 1995. It was not that long ago. And you were to say, there's going to be this thing called an Instagram influencer. you would just be like, what? Like it's, some young person that wields more influence than like Tom Brady or something. You'd be like, well, what do they do? It's like, if it's a girl, she looks hot. If it's a boy, he like
they
has
take
a cool
couple
car.
pictures.
Like, and it's like, well, what are they actually doing? It's like, they're not actually,
Nothing.
They're literally doing nothing. They're just like filming themselves, being dramatic, but they will wield incredible influence in our society. They will be very wealthy people, and we will wonder what happened. I think it's going to be like that. There's going to be these things where we look at them and we're like, wow, that just makes total sense how that happened. But it's impossible to predict right now. I really believe that. I think expect the unexpected.
I have a prediction about influencers.
A prediction.
We're putting this on the record.
Yeah.
And I think, especially in 2025, we're going to see a big influx of AI influencers where they're not real people. And this is already happening.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to get real traction because if I'm a human influencer, I have to sit down every day and I have to record myself.
Right.
It takes time. I have to, for I guess a lot of them, make yourself look presentable.
Right.
You probably have to put some strategy to the things that you want to talk about and know what's up with current events. But going back to an agentic framework around that, you could create an AI agent that is it's the actual digital avatar that are freakishly human-like right now.
Yeah.
And they can speak in a way that you would never be able to tell that it's AI. Their lips move exactly like they should when they're talking. They can move their hands. They can have any kind of backdrop. So you could have the same AI avatar that maybe is an exact replica of you or something fictitious that you create. Put it in any backdrop in any country you want it to be, in any scenario you want it to be at any time. Have another agent that goes out and is looking what else is trending and just apply that to my own thing. And it's just running on its own and people are clicking on it because it's entertaining because we know how to optimize that. We have billions of examples of viral videos that you could just feed it to and say, just do those things. So that's my prediction is that there'll be far fewer like actual human content on TikTok and things like that. And it's going to be AI that's going to be actually what we're going to be watching.
And I think, not to one up that, but I think to add on to that, and this might be where you're getting to as well, they do have the AI influencers already out there because it's cheaper to pay 12 people in a dark basement to, hey, we have to push this product. Pepsi's coming out with a new one. Let's put it in a woman's hands that has brown hair and we're going to launch it in these markets. And a lot of them are not hiding the fact that they're AI. It's, this is an AI model showing this off.
Really?
But it shows a real world example because it's so, the resolution of it, the feel of it is so realistic that you go, oh, I know it's fake, but I'm still going to consume it. It's still, I want to see it in someone's hand, someone drinking it, someone beautiful. Yeah. And if I drink Diet Pepsi, I'm going to be hot too.
Yeah, exactly.
But I also think it's going to go to even another level of the personalization of it is going to be, oh, Pete, you're watching this. It's going to be a personal video to you or a personal something that AI animation of them addressing you saying, wouldn't it be great if you were drinking Diet Pepsi too, to where it really just captures you based on your input and what you've been looking at and feed it into your, marketing CRM and some of your automation tools to have it spit out to go, this person's been looking at all these different types of clothes. Let's send them a personalized ad.
Yeah. Totally.
It's Jevons paradox right there in action, right? All of a sudden, 100%. Everyone needs their own H100. We don't need, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
And we'll probably have AI agents that consume it and spit it back out to us in a different format.
Exactly. Right.
It's just this weird loop of just around and around.
AI filters. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
that's something I know people are working on this, but like content curation with AI, like, is there a way to kind of put a filter between you and the big platforms algorithms? That would be another example. Like, I want to mediate whatever Facebook is trying to send me, or whatever Instagram is trying to send me, or whatever Twitter/X is trying to send me, right? Maybe that's where things go to,
Yeah.
Yeah. I've also got like a whole dark rabbit hole too that we can go down, but I don't.
Let's
go. Stay positive. I mean, the obvious one, and I know they're already doing tons of work on this, is like AI girlfriends, AI companions.
Yes.
That one is really disturbing to me, but that's like another way this could go.
Well, and I've seen it in senior homes too, where they don't have a whole lot of family that's around, or grandma doesn't have, the grandsons or granddaughters coming to visit them. And they have literally set up, I think it was in Japan.
Oh, wow.
Might have been China. It was an Asian part of the world where they literally had, here's a chatbot friend that you can talk to, and they're communicating back and forth with it. And they loved it. And they knew it was fake. I mean, it was on a computer.
Yeah.
But they just had this interaction, and it would ask more questions about them. And of course they want to talk. And they showed more brain stimulation that was happening because of it, because clearly you're interacting at that point.
I love that for that reason. That's not the dark rabbit hole. Like to me, that's the going towards the light.
Yeah.
There's a guy that I just met last week. He's going to be speaking at our next AI Lab here in February 19th at Service Express. Name's Dan Hungerford. He started a company called everfriends.ai. And I'll let him tell his story. Actually, I think he'd be a great guest for our podcast too. But it's exactly what you just described. There's a whole, like, loneliness is a major health issue.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And he's helping to solve that. And he has a great story behind, where this came from. But it's exactly that. Like on your phone, it's an app. It's out there. If you wanted to go look at it, everfriends.ai, and you can sign up, and you have a digital person that you can talk to, and it gets to know you. Like it remembers. Like he shared an example. He said when you first sign up, it asks you questions like, what are your grandkids' names? And then as you interact with this very lifelike digital avatar, it will ask, how's little Joey doing? How did baseball go last week? Like those kind of things. And you can have that interaction. And I think that's wonderful. Now, the AI girlfriend, boyfriend thing is scarier. But these are people that are already in a lonely situation, and it's probably not going to get better for them. Like if they're living on their own, or they're in some kind of a facility where they're on their own, their chances for interaction are probably very low unless they have a great family that goes and supports them. That's where I think this has a great application. Not on the front end of your life where you really need to learn, how to create relationships and things like that. But,
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on open source versus closed source when it comes to these models? One of the things about DeepSeek, as you mentioned earlier, is that it is an open source platform. But if you ask the CEO of Perplexity, he's actually more in the favor of closed source and the security of why we should have closed source models. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very rich tradition in software, is open source, closed source. You're working for the man, I work not for the man. Also, open source doesn't necessarily mean free. It just means you can see what it's doing. So that's a common misconception that people often
That's a great point to bring up. Thank you.
Yeah, like open source does not mean free. Like you often, you could steal it, I suppose. But that's a key distinction. I think I'm going to split the difference. I think it depends. What are we talking about here? And, what are the use cases of all these different things? Should you have like a weapons grade AI system that, Anduril makes? Probably not. But what does that even mean for your context? I don't know. Like maybe they're building advanced drone systems. Like, should that be open source? I don't know. Probably not. But, what does that look like? I think the thing that is a bull case for bull as in like we want to do that, like the stock market reference, for open source is then you can actually look at what it's doing. You can understand when there is censorship being put in the models. Like they've already asked DeepSeek some questions about Tiananmen Square and Taiwan, and it kind of gives the classic CCP answers, right? The models that a lot of the U.S. companies come out of Silicon Valley, it's like well-known, political, echo chambers out there, and they say exactly what you would expect. They even raise just like interesting questions that are like forced ethics on you. Like I grew up really into fish tanks as an example, and I'm getting back into them. Okay,
nice.
I'm very excited about this, and I asked it ChatGPT just a silly question about what kind of fish I should get, and it went on this diatribe about how having pets is a big ethical question, and I should consider not having a fish in a tank. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I suppose, but this is not even at all what I asked you.
Right.
So open source, you could just be going, you could rip off whatever is putting that answer in and just be like, yo, you want a goldfish and you want to get this kind and have fun. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to serial killer eat this. I don't know. You know what I mean? It felt like way Big Brother to me. But then at the same time, I mean, like, there's a lot of information that out there that we don't have any problem keeping confidential, like how to build weapon systems or even just how to undermine certain things. Like, I know a guy who worked at like a consumer-facing stock trading company, and one of their biggest things was like going on Reddit and looking for people publishing hacks on how to like take advantage of their like promotional offerings. Like, okay, like, do we really want to just have code out there that like 12-year-olds could download and with 5 clicks, you know? We've kind of decided yes as a society, but like those are the questions. So it's tough to tell. You know, I'm an engineer. I don't want to wade too much into that, but I think as an engineer, I weigh more on the idea of a light touch from regulation at this stage in the game, just because we don't want to kind of strangle the baby in the cradle, if you will. And we know, as we've just seen with DeepSeek, our competitors are not slowing down in any shape or form. They're going for the moon. I don't know. I sent you an email if you want to look at some graphics. I don't know if we can show graphics, but just talking about the raw electricity production of China versus the United States. I don't know if you guys have seen this chart, but
no, I have not.
It's very compelling. The United States is just, maybe for the viewers, it's literally just like flat over the last 25 years, and China is literally like this. I mean, it's just incredible. And you say like, well, that seems concerning in just almost every dimension. So maybe, we're more efficient and this, that, and the other, but it's like, well, they're like 3Xing our electricity production. Yeah. And we're just have this entire discussion is about AI and chips. And maybe at some point you say, well, like, doesn't even matter if their chips are 10% as efficient as ours because they have 1,000 to our 1.
Right.
So it doesn't matter. They still outwin, And so I think I'm very bullish on AI, and I think we should try to have a light touch, as light as we feel comfortable with.
Which is interesting because I did, doing a little bit of research about this topic, I looked at, are there any real guidelines out there other than policies that companies may put in place for themselves? And I found that ISO 42001, whatever the hell that means.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
But ISO has...
I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah.
In case you're wondering which one, has a responsible AI component now in it. So ISO is now trying to give it... And it's very generic about the governance of AI. It's very loose because I don't think they even know how to... these are the people that write guidelines and policies, and they're going... Yeah, we have no freaking idea how to contain any of this without containing it, like you're saying, too much to where now we're stagnant and China's going, we don't give a shit how it goes and we're going to let it rip.
Yeah. Well, I do have a lot more thoughts on that. I mean, that's always like a question of where do you want to regulate a technology? Where do you want to do this? And I remember this was right at the beginning of all this AI hype, so probably late 22. I read this blog post, and the author was trying to come up with something you could do with AI, even in a theoretical sense, that wasn't already illegal. They couldn't come up with anything. Literally. I mean, like, because you're like, oh, you could use it to hack a bank. And it's like, yeah, but that's already a federal crime. Oh, but you could use it to, like, build a gun and go shoot. It's like, well, that's actually already illegal. And so you kind of are like, okay, well, is it this, like, enabling? You're just enabling a group of people differently. But... I think the way to regulate these things is at the application layer and at the, what it does layer.
Yep.
If an AI agent is just doing its own thing, why do we need to get involved in that? But if it's now suddenly, tanking the stock market because it's doing all these, illegal trades, okay, well, now the SEC can come in and be like, well, hey, you actually like hacked their server, got insider information, and then made a bunch of bets. Like, that's actually illegal right now. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Well, the AI agent did it. It's like, well, somebody set it up.
Someone's behind that.
Yeah. I mean, the rule. What I always say is like it's a tool, and so use it like you would any other tool.
Yep.
It's kind of that simple, I think. I think we like to overcomplicate things.
Yeah, definitely.
There has been a lot of action, though. Like, for example, President Biden signed that executive order about AI regulation. And I think most people agreed it was like pretty draconian. It was not going to do what it intended to do. It had hardcore benchmarks in things in terms of like this many parameters or this much compute, which, as we've discussed a little bit, that's kind of meaningless due to the way that technology evolves. The one thing that I will say is there's this idea of regulatory capture. Have you guys ever heard that term? It's a term basically that says a lot of industries are very like established players in industries are very excited about having government regulation because it actually secures their position in the market because they can capture the regulatory structure such that they're the only players. So like, how many new banks have been made since 2008? It's zero in the United States because the new banking regulation, how many people don't know that? The banking regulation made it basically impossible to start a new bank. And it was all under this guise of like, well, we're going to protect the consumers and do this, that, and the other. But really it secured these banks as completely insulated from any competition. So the thing I worry about a lot is, current players in the AI space making it so new people can't even compete. The government just prohibits you from doing that under the guise of safety or under the guise of, national security, right?
Yeah.
And so, this is getting back to those adult conversations. This is real life, and there's actual risk with things, and we have to figure out where we want to live. It's kind of like any business. There's like an adoption curve, and there's some industries and some players that can take more risk than others. I'm not suggesting we turn all our power plants over to AI agents and have them run them. That'd be crazy. But at the same time, a lot of digital applications makes a lot of sense to start experimenting in a very rigorous way. I think we just need to be very careful about regulatory capture, government overreach, shutting things down. Things like we get bottlenecked by things like electricity production, not actually anything to do with AI, but like we just can't afford it. It's kind of like everything. Everything is connected, and how do we build a society where we all feel comfortable with the way that it's running, but we're actually still able to advance and provide for people, in some kind of a fair, just way.
I have what's going to be a very cumbersome pivot as we kind of get close to our time here. So you've spoke, and hopefully we'll come back and do it again at the monthly AI Lab.
Oh, sure.
That Drew and I created.
Wonderful platform, by the way.
Appreciate that. And appreciate your time.
It is.
Coming to speak for us. And there's two pillars there. There's inspiration and application. Mm-hmm. And we want to try to apply those same things to the podcast as well. So before the podcast started, we talked about, some actual practical applications. You have your company, Bear Creek Systems, but you're also working with City Innovations, and you guys are working on a product that you're pretty proud of right now. Could you speak to that and what it does? And
yeah, totally. So what we're building a product called HiveMind, and like you said, it's a collaboration with City Innovations. Josh Barker is the guy running that project. And I'm kind of like the actual AI guy building all the AI tech in it. And basically what it is we like to say it's conversations into actions. So we have a bunch of transcriptions from conversations that you have, basically your meetings with other people. We have your emails, we have Slack channels, all these sorts of kind of traditional mediums of communication. We crunch all that with using various AI tools, and then we provide actions. So it could be anything from a to-do list to actually formally generating documents or kind of reports that you need to make. To actually helping you maybe, glean information or insights that you didn't actually see originally, right? Like we had one of our beta clients, we were talking with them, and they're like, yeah, I asked it to summarize like this last meeting, and it came up with something that I'm like, we didn't talk about that. And then he like double clicked on it, and it was like, oh yeah, I just totally forgot about that 8-minute part of the conversation. And, so there's a lot of things like that. This is, kind of getting towards a little more bleeding edge type stuff. But this would be an example. Like, how do we do that? Well, we have like an agent underneath that's reading through all your information and building up, a data structure. And then we can do things like give you insights or give you to-do lists or even help you maybe remember things or even kind of go beyond that, like one step beyond that. Like, hey, you mentioned at the beginning, Pete, loop in this person. Yeah. Hey, it turns out you had a conversation with person X last quarter. That might be somebody, I wasn't thinking about that. So if you're interested in a product like that, we're currently accepting beta users. You can reach out to me or you can reach out to Josh Barker. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up. It actually is a really cool project. Yeah.
It does sound cool.
It's awesome.
How many times, I don't know if it has, I'm assuming it has this functionality, but if it doesn't, then this is some product research, even though I've never seen it. How many times have you been sitting there and you're talking with somebody like, oh man, I know I just talked about this with somebody. Can you like pull it up and say, hey, remind me or find my conversation that I had with so-and-so in that meeting about the TPS reports or whatever. Like, can it go back and search in the history of all of these meetings and all your interactions and emails and like find that data for you without having to go to the search bar of Outlook and like...
Yeah. So just so the audience is aware, we did not discuss this before. Yes. And I actually literally used an agentic framework called LangChain is this whole set of tools, and they have an agent thing that you can build. And I actually built that exact functionality to go through the transcripts. So you can ask it a question. You can say like, hey, I remember meeting with this person. Can you please query all of those transcripts and give me a broad summary of what our relationship is to date? So that would be like an example. So the short answer is
That's awesome.
Yep. And that's just the beginning. Like, this has got a lot of really cool things. And that's kind of what I mean where it's like expect the unexpected. Every time we talk to someone, it's like an idea like that where you're like, wow, that's really great. Let's hit the code as soon as we can to build that. Yeah.
It's just, I'm not getting younger and my memory's not getting better. But there's so many times I'm like, damn it, this conversation can be so much better right now if I could just remember what I said.
Yes.
Or did I already have this conversation with you? Like, that'd just be super helpful for me.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely have to.
I might have to sign up as one of your beta users.
Yeah, we'd love that.
All right.
I'm excited.
Well, Alex, thanks for being on our show. Really appreciate it. Always great pleasure talking with you.
Yeah.
Tell everybody where we can find you.
Yeah. So, like you guys mentioned, I'm independent at Bear Creek Systems. You can go to bearcreek.systems. Well, it's kind of a weird website, but that's what it is. And also, I write a blog. It's Mead at substack.com.
No E.
No E.
At the end.
MEAD.
If you asked an AI tool how many E's are in Mead, what would it say?
I don't know. That's a good question. Who knows?
One.
5.
MEAD.
MEAD.substack.com. Yeah. But awesome. Yeah, it was a great pleasure, and thank you guys so much for having me.
Awesome.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. If you want to like and subscribe to our podcast, please do so and enjoy some more that's going to be coming out. Thanks, everybody.